Hey guys, what's up? It's Finch here, and we're going to be bringing you guys another Metagame Monday, but there's a catch. We're actually going to have two Metagame Mondays today. I felt bad that I wasn't uploading much over the weekend. I had a busy weekend, and I'll get to that in a second, but we're going to have one on the Metagame changes and shifts due to the official ladder tournament, and also in response to the bans of Cinderace and Magearna. We did touch on the responses to those bans initially, but now the metagame's developed a couple weeks, and OLT is right in the middle of the qualification phase, so now it's a perfect time to do a bit of a metagame update video. In addition, the second Metagame Monday, which will come out later today, is going to be on Rillaboom and its evolution in the SSC metagame, so definitely stay tuned for that. But I also want to say a couple things. So this weekend, the Smogon Snake Draft happened, which is a tournament that's a snake draft. There are 14 players picked on the 10 teams. I went second overall, and I'm going to be playing SSOU for the Astrodias. I believe that's what it's called, my team. I'm paired with a lot of friends, and I'm really excited about it. So I'm going to bring you guys one tournament game of my own at a pretty high level, hopefully all on SSU, but maybe some in NU if things happen. I don't know, depending on how things shake out. And each week starting next week, it could be 9, could be 11 or 12, it really depends on how far we get into the tournament, but I'm really excited about it, and we'll also be bringing you guys coverage from that. So stay tuned for a lot of SSOU tournament content and SS lower tier tournament content too. A lot of things to be excited about in the future, so really excited about that. Yeah, I'm also be making a power rankings article, which I've been already tirelessly working on over the last handful of hours. I'm going to continue working on this week, so my activity on Discord and PS this week might not be the same, but I'm promising you guys I'm going to upload at least most days, if not every day, so don't worry about that. This channel is going to stay pumping. It's just a busy, hectic week, but it's all fun stuff that I'm really excited and passionate about working on. So, speaking of stuff I'm passionate about, let's talk about SSOU on this Metagame Monday. So we're going to be discussing some offensive threats that improved in the metagame, as well as some bulkier Pokemon that improved in this metagame. And following that up, we're also going to discuss some Pokemon that might have seen a bit of a dip in usage. Alright, so first and foremost, we sorry, just got to pause for a millisecond here. Alright, my bad about that, but yeah, so some offensive threats, defensive threats, and then Pokemon that probably got a little bit worse over the metagame shift, so let's discuss all of them. First and foremost, the big offensive threats that improved quite a bit in the metagame in my eyes. The first one's Rillaboom, something that we're going to discuss in a later metagame Monday, so I don't want to kind of beat this horse to death quite yet, or beat this monkey to death, rather. I don't know what I'm saying at this point. Yikes. It's Monday, guys. Alright, anyway, point being, I'm going to discuss this more in a later video, so therefore I just want to say Grassy Surge really made it a great option. Definitely a lot of support, and Grassy Gled's a super practical move, so stay tuned. Anyway, next up we have Nasty Block. What is this? What is this? Is this something that you guys have been begging for me to use on the channel for months and months and months that I might be using later this week? Stay tuned and find out. But nah, jokes aside, we're going to be talking about Swords Dance Groudon on the physical end of the spectrum because it's much better than Special Groudon. And Aqua Jet, Swords Dance, knockoff Crabhammer, it's devastating. It's going to get a kill almost every game if it gets in safely. It is walled by Como-O and Urshifu Rapid Strike, but that aside, it does a really great job of breaking through things. Knockoff is strong as hell with adaptability, same with Crabhammer, and Priority Aqua Jet is great for revenge killing things like Volcarona. So yeah, definitely try it out. I think it's really good to use on offensive teams with the right partners. And it even fits on the balance if you pair it with Teleport. It's just been one of the better wall breakers in this metagame right now, and I definitely think it's going to rise to OUV usage if it's not already there in the near future. Next up, we have Urshifu. Now, people are actually using a different kind of approach to it. Choice Band is no longer like the thing with Urshifu. A lot of them are running Life Orb with either 4 attacks or bulk up 3 attacks. Some people even drop in Close Combat for Iron Head or Poison Jab too, because you don't really need Close Combat a ton. Personally, though, I like being able to one-shot Ferrothorn and not have to worry about running out of Wicked Low PP. So I like having that second nuke personally. So I like Bulk Up / Iron Head, Wicked Blow, Close Combat, Sucker Punch. And I find it to be really effective at breaking through the metagame. Oh, I also love being able to one-shot Blissey and Chansey. Yeah, that's important too. But needless to say, Urshifu's a really strong option. It's only getting better with time. Even with people running Clefable, since you're running Iron Head a lot, it's actually really easy to manage. This is just a bulk up dual stab set that's been running around for a while, but you can really go a number of directions. So yeah, Scizor is something that is also rising in popularity in the metagame. That's largely because of it being a great answer to things like Togekiss, Kyurem, two Pokemon we're going to get to in a minute, as well as Rillaboom on the offensive end. Bullet Punch offers a great deal of utility. It's just a good glue Pokemon on hyper-offensive teams. It's also able to withstand a lot of neutral attacks that aren't like Choice Band or Life Orb or Choice Specs boosted too, which can come in handy as well. And the Swords Dance plus Knockoff plus Roost option lets you beat down Skarmory and Corviknight 1v1 when you figure they'd be normal checks and counters to your Scizor. So yeah, that goes a long way. Next up we have Kyurem. Kyurem's Substitute plus Roost set with Icicle Sphere and Freeze Dry actually is a great stall breaker due to Icicle Sphere having 48 PP, Sub Roost plus Pressure, just going such a long way against those teams. However, it's also worth noting that Choice Specs is a demon, and in this metagame, it's doing really well. Without Cinderace and Magearna, it's clearly thriving. Focus Blast can actually 2-hit heal Blissey, which is impressive in my opinion. And on top of that, we're also seeing an uptick in usage of some bulky waters like Toxapex, and honestly, things like Tangrowth are also popping up more and more, and needless to say, a single Freeze Dry can take them out with ease. Draco Meteor is also a great nuke if you're not worried about them going into something like a Primarina, a Clefable, or a Togekiss too. All of those Pokemon are going to struggle switching into Ice moves as well. Primarina with Freeze Dry, and other two with Ice Beam, so therefore, Specs Kyurem is a great pick as well. I definitely recommend using it. There have been some balance teams in particular that have been making great use of it as well. Next up, we have Togekiss. Togekiss, I think that Scarf Togekiss is actually a great option, not only an on-hyper offense, but much like Scizor as an anti-hyper offensive option as well, due to the fact that it's able to outrun most Pokemon on those teams and flinch them down, or even trick something to deter an opposing sleeping attack, especially if you trick them as they go for a setup move. Like, for example, let's say you trick Zeraora as it goes for Bulk Up, or you trick Scizor as it goes for Swords Dance, so you're able to predict around them going for their stabs because you have something to deter that. That can go a long way. In addition, Trick is also a great utility against bulky teams, being able to trick things like Blissey, or even Toxapex, and that could go a long way, especially if the Toxapex is Rocky Helmet over Black Sludge, because then you're not taking damage each turn, and you could even punish things like Urshifu going for Wicked Blow close combat with that Rocky Helmet, which is something that actually won me a game just yesterday, funnily enough, as specific as a scenario that might be. And if you're able to trick them off, you could also run Nasty Plot to help sweep those bulky teams or slower teams, but alternatively, another option is Dazzling Gleam to get a one-shot on Dragapult, and do over 60% to things like Zeraora as well. Also doesn't risk missing on the off chance that Air Slash misses when you have something in the bag otherwise, so that can always come in handy as well. Of course, though, there are more offensive options in the metagame to explore as well that are getting better. Alright, so now we have the second tier of offensive options, and this is not like some solid ranking, like these Pokemon are not necessarily better or worse than the ones we just went over, for example, but it's just kind of the order that came to me in terms of I guess rough usage / viability / my personal trends, because of course these are videos I made, so this is just factoring in my perspective. You guys could think that other Pokemon are getting better or worse, and I'd love to hear about that in the comments, guys. So if you guys are watching this and you'd like to engage about the metagames, then definitely leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking, and I'd love to also broaden my own horizons, because something I've been noticing recently is that if you come into games with a limited perspective, then you're kind of hurting yourself. You're doing a disservice to yourself. So I'm trying to come in with as open a mind as possible, not dismiss any possibilities, and I think I'm getting slowly better because of it. And yes, I've been playing this game for 9 years, and I believe I can still get so much better at this game. So you guys definitely can too, especially if you're less experienced. So I'm glad you're watching these videos, and I hope that I'm helping you guys too. So yeah, anyway, let's talk in the comments about that kind of stuff for sure. But the next tier of offensive threats that are getting better in my eyes, one of them happens to be Hawlucha leading the pack, and it does really well with the aforementioned Rillaboom. Rillaboom plus Hawlucha Hyper Offense is definitely great, especially at cruising up the lower ladder, as a lot of teams are just unprepared for that offensive combination. It gets unburdened, and with this spread, you can actually substitute up on things like Toxapex, eat that Scald with ease, and then proceed to sweep. You also are able to beat non-Whirlwind to Powdon, and most are running Toxic or Rock Slide right now, so that can go a long way as well. And Swords Dance plus Dual Stabs with Unburden, making you quicker, coupled with Grassy Seed, making you bulkier, coupled with Acrobatics, doing a lot of damage with that item use and dual stab coverage. It makes you great. You're worst able to chip down something like a Toxapex or Clefable, and then put it in the range where something else on your hyper offensive team can sweep. But best case scenario, they're already weakened or they don't have them, and then you're able to just destroy teams, especially if you could set up on something like a Powdon using Toxic, because then you get a turn set up there, and then potentially another turn set up the next turn. It goes a long way, and it can spiral out of control really quickly, especially for unprepared opponents. Beyond that, though, another Pokemon that I think is really thriving in the metagame, something that I've been outspoken as calling unviable or limited in viability for the longest time, is Urshifu Rapid Strike. And this is what I'm trying to say. Like, sometimes you should not limit your horizons, because a lot of great players better than me, guys like Empo and Starmaster, or new up-and-coming players, well, rather not new, but up-and-coming currently players like Ox to Fox and his rain team have been using Urshifu Rapid Strike to great success, and I think that's amazing. I think it's really cool seeing the metagame adapt and integrate new threats, and this is one of them, Urshifu Rapid Strike. I know it struggles with things like Rocky Helmet Tangrowth, or Slowbro even, or Toxapex especially, and those are big deterrents to using it. However, when you use it with the right support, for example, Empo used it on a rain team with Calm Mind plus Thunder Clefable, which destroys Toxapex scores more often than not because you can't beat it with Haze. Or on rain teams, meaning it's going to be much stronger, potentially being able to kill Toxapex after hazards in rain, or even destroy things like Slowbro with a couple U-turns, and a couple close combats and Tangrowth, forget about it. So yeah, Choice Band on rain especially is devastating, and I think it's not the most consistent option, but it definitely is a very viable one, something that I definitely didn't give enough credit in the past. I think it's really cool to see it have an uptick in usage, and I'm glad I kept an open mind to it. I know I maybe was a bit close to it at first, but it's really cool seeing it, and I'm glad that my mind has been changed. I'm glad I'm being persuaded that's a viable option. I'm definitely looking forward to trying it out myself, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, next up we have Volcarona. I've touched on Volcarona in a million different videos on this channel recently, but yeah, it's a great option. There are a ton of different things you could run. 2 attacks Roost, 2 attacks Substitute, Mono attacking with Safeguard Roost, or you could run 3 attacks with Bug Buzz, 3 attacks with Giga Drain, Fire Dance, Flamethrower, Fire Blast, etc. I've even seen Defog on it, for Christ's sake. I mean, you could use just about anything you'd like, and it'll work out. So yeah, this is just a sample of an offensive 2 attacks reset, which does pretty well in some specific hyper-offensive teams in my eyes, but you do see Safeguard and 3 attacks a little bit more. You could really go a number of ways, number of spreads, etc. It's just getting better and better in my eyes due to how versatile and adaptable it is to the metagame and potential checks and counters. For example, it started running Psychic for Como and Toxfix, and started running Safeguard for Blissey and Chansey, and Toxic Powdon, and so on and so forth. You see Giga Drain once people start using Gastrodon, the list goes on and on and on. That's my point. However, something that also adapts to the metagame very well, but not at the same level of usage or viability, is Aegislash, a Pokemon that was written off initially once the DLC came out due to the uptick in Mandibuzz, and then other offensive threats overwhelming it, such as Urshifu, but now it's back in business. People are running a Spell Tag 4 attacks mixed attacking variant with Shadow Ball, Flash Cannon, Close Combat, and Shadow Sneak, and it's able to absolutely demolish bulky cores with Shadow Ball, sending things like Toxapex that are physically defensive down in 2 hits, or just absolutely demolishing things like Slowbro and Tangrowth, whereas Close Combat is able to 2KO Blissey and potentially even Chansey as well. Shadow Sneak's get priority for things like Weakened Volcarona and Dragapult, and Flash Cannon is good at hitting fairy types such as Clefable and Togekiss as well. And it's just a really great versatile option. It's also very hard to one-shot without a super effective move, so you're able to stomach a lot of attacks. You could even run Choice Specs over Spell Tag if you'd like to have that extra power. However, something that might be a bit less directly powerful, but also a good offensive option, is Subcombine Primarina. Of course, it's going to struggle with Chansey and Blissey, but if you run it on really offensive teams that are kind of able to take advantage of those with an assortment of physical attackers that can abuse their presences, then Primarina is a great complement that's able to sweep teams that are unprepared for it. And that could be something that you manipulate in your synergetic scheme on your offensive teams. Just the standard Subcombine set's all you can do. You could see Draining Kiss over Moonblast quite a bit. I respect that, but I don't love the lack of damage output, truth be told. The reliance on Scald isn't great. But I still understand why, I think it's fair. This is a spread to live a Moonblast and Clefable behind a substitute of +0, but people have run more offensive or physically defensive spreads as well, and there are really a number of things you could do. For example, if you run more physically defensive spread, it helps a lot with Urshifu, both Urshifus actually, and even living a +2 Haluchit from full health, which can go a long way, in my opinion. Also, there is Meteor Beam the Necrozma, of course, something I've showcased on this channel multiple times, and even had in a prior metagame video as well. Meteor Beam plus Power Herb is able to take advantage of things like Mandibuzz, for example, and it just also makes it a very strong Pokemon. If you're running Rock Polish, you could even run Psyshock over Photon Geyser if you're scared of Chansey and Blissey, and then it just becomes an absolute terror to switch into. But I like Photon Geyser for extra power, especially on the lower ladder, and you could run also Stealth Rock over Rock Polish if you wish to make it more of a utility, as it's going to be able to beat down all of the potential entry hazard removal Pokemon that are in the metagame. But alright, there are more than just offensive threats in the metagame, of course. And on the note of those other Pokemon, there are bulky Pokemon such as Gastrodon, Corviknight, Skarmory, Blissey, Tangrowth, and Hatterene that are all thriving in the metagame right now, in my opinion. Gastrodon, in my eyes, is one of the more surprising but intriguing options. You'd think that it would do pretty well against Cinderace and also be able to stomach the Volt Switches of Magearna while checking setup variants potentially with Earthquake, but But it turns out that it actually got much better in this metagame, as people have discovered a heavy duty boots plus sticky ult set that impossible to remove boots, so therefore it's always going to be immune to hazards. And that goes a long way as well, in my opinion, as you could run it on teams with things like Skarmory over Corviknight, and then you basically could say, okay, I want hazards to be up on both sides because I'm not as worried about spikes if I have something like Gastrodon as a grander Pokemon that's immune, and Skarmory, which is obviously immune to them. So I sped up my own spikes, and I can force you to defog if I'm worried about hazards. And that's just a different strategy that enables so many different team building outlets. And I think it's really cool to see the metagame adapting like that, and archetypes kind of finding different ways to plan out, especially for balanced teams, which in my eyes are not doing as great as they once were. So it's cool to see them playing out in a different fashion, and I'm really interested to see how that develops more in the future. It also can run things like Toxic plus Clear Smog to help check things like Volcarona, which lack Giga Drain. And I think that goes a long way too. It's also great at checking things like Specs Dragapult, and even potentially what am I about to say? Oh yeah, Aegis Slash, especially if it doesn't get Shadow Ball drops. So yeah, it goes a long way. It's very especially bulky. You do miss out on having the ability of Storm Drain for things like rain teams, but Sticky Ult has been standard in a Gastron for a long time. It also means you're going to be checking Trick Clefable, so you're not going to lose something to being tricked on your defensive cores, and that goes a long way in those matchups too. Overall, I think Gastron is an underrated option in the metagame right now, and I think it's definitely kind of evolving to the state of the tier around it, which is really cool. And I think things like this are some of the most intriguing metagame developments to me personally. Anyway, next up we have the two Steel Birds, Corviknight and Skarmory. Corviknight is kind of the premier defogger. It took over Mandibuz's place in the current metagame, I'd say, and it's come a long way. Of course, it does struggle with the rising Magnezone, which unfortunately didn't quite fit in this video, but I did touch on it in the past. But Magnezone and Magnapone Analytic both are really well in this metagame, doing really well in this metagame, so definitely try that out too. But yeah, it's able to defog amazingly well with pressure, and it's also a good pivot, check the things like Bisharp and Rillaboom and Non-Roost Scizor, I suppose, as well. So it goes a long way. And same for Skarmory defensively, but it's meant to set up Spike's utility instead of defog. And Toxic's great for hitting things like Rotom Heat, Zeraora, Volcarona, Hippowdon, etc. that like try and switch in and like either beat it down offensively or set up on it, etc. So that goes a long way. And beyond those three, we also have Blissey with Heavy Duty Boost Teleport, which is definitely more popular than Chansey right now. Tangrowth, which is slowly rising as the premier defensive grass type, and Block is also a really cool option because it helps it check / counter / trap non-toxic Toxapex, which I think is really cool personally. And also, there are people running Infestation plus Sleep Powder and trapping things that try and stay in and wake up against it, which Eel and Mortis has been doing, which is also really cool. And last but not least, there's also Hatterene, which is great at kind of deterring hazard setup for those aforementioned Skarmory type of teams, but also it's a good sweeper against bulky teams as well. So yeah, you could also run Psychic with Modest to help break things like Quagsire if you're scared about that. I prefer the bulk though right now because it helps you live Shifu and other things. So yeah, those are some bulky Pokemon that in my eyes are slowly starting to thrive in the metagame and really picking up from lower points that they were previously at. But also, there's some Pokemon that are struggling in the metagame. Is the world coming to an end? Well, I don't think so, but it might be definitely winding down for these Pokemon. Mandibuzz, unfortunately, has fallen out of favor. While it is a great Wicked Blow resist and a check to ghost types, unfortunately, there's not much else going for it right now. Not having pressure like Corviknight makes it a lot less efficient as a defogger in the metagame right now, and it also isn't able to check things like Rillaboom quite as well, which is unfortunate. It definitely has its teams that'll fit on, but it's definitely not as common as it once was. Excadrill is a timeless Pokemon, and it's great, but it's honestly more of a revenge killer / utility than it is an offensive threat purely as a breaker right now, due to Skarmory, Corviknight picking up a ton of usage, and Rillaboom being easily able to dispatch it as a revenge killer as well. So Excadrill is still great, but it might have a bit of a redefined usage, and therefore slightly reduced overall viability. Then there's Rotom Heat, which is still good, especially against things like Togekiss and even Rillaboom and Scizor, but it definitely saw better days when Magearna and Cinderace were in the tier naturally, two things that it handled pretty decently, especially Magearna. I must admit that it's also harder to fit onto common team structures right now due to the lack of defined defensive niche, but it can still really force the issue with a Nasty Plot set, especially Nasty Plot plus Toxic or Pain Split, and I would say that because of that it's worth using, but it just might not be as viable as it once was. Chansey, again, it's just worse than Blissey right now. Lacking heavy duty boots, having to run Eviolite, and being subject to item displacement a lot is really unfortunate as it cripples its overall bulk. It's still viable on some stallier builds, but I definitely wouldn't go out of my way to use it right now. And then Marowak Lola, unfortunately, is just falling off entirely, which is pretty lame, but I'd say that overall it's still a viable option. It's just pretty limited. I would really only use it on Trick Room right now, but definitely use it on those teams. It's still devastatingly strong. It's just hard to justify defensively on more, balance in both the offensive teams, if you will. And last but not least, Ferrothorn, and I hesitate to bring this up because Ferrothorn's still a great Pokemon right now, but it's just kind of been cycling out. You can't really fit it on a ton of builds. You want to use Skarmory for your spikes. You want to use Tangrowth as your grass. You want to use, Corviknight or Excadrill as your Steel type, etc. And it's definitely not the easiest thing to justify right now, especially without Specs Magearna being in the tier, but I can still see it being used a ton, so that's why I put it at the bottom of this list despite it being probably the most common Pokemon or one of the most common Pokemon on it. It's unfortunate, but it's kind of caught in the middle. It was caught in the middle a little bit last generation too, but then it found its way out. And I definitely would still try Ferrothorn. It's just not the absolute best Pokemon. But yeah, guys, this is what we have. These are some metagame updates, some trends going upward, and a few going downward as well. Definitely let me know your thoughts on these Pokemon. And if you enjoyed this, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And finally, if you're still here, guys, consider purchasing Jambad's book. It is really one of the things that opened my eyes up to some of the things I mentioned in this video about, keeping an open mind and how to strategize in the game. And if you're a newer player, I can guarantee you it's going to help you find success in the games. It's really one of the best, if not the single best, competitive Pokemon resources for newer players or people just looking to improve at any level of the game out there. And I know not everyone is fortunate enough to be able to afford to fund things that involve their hobby, and I totally get it. I'm not trying to force this down your throat, but if it's something you're interested in and you are fortunate enough to be able to afford it, then definitely look into it. And if not, guys, thank you so much. I'm going to continue to pump out these metagame content videos because I love helping you guys and I love interacting with you guys. And speaking of interactions, be sure to leave, your thoughts on this and the metagame right now, what Pokemon are getting better and what are getting worse in the comments below. But all right, guys, that's all I have for you right now. Stay tuned for the Rillaboom video and have a great day. All right, peace out, guys. Bye.